Then next up, our next speaker is Anton Antonenko. Anton is vice president at the Ukrainian think tank Dixi Group. And the title of his presentation is War in the Energy Sector and Green Recovery. What challenges and opportunity does it bring? So, Anton, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for having me. And I fully agree with what Ilona has already mentioned and set the scene. Ilona has already mentioned that a lot in this war is about energy. Russia has been using energy as a weapon long time ago. And it's not a big news, but just some time ago, 2 days ago, actually Russia clearly attacked very civilian energy sites. In fact, it's been attacking energy sites ever since the full-scale invasion, and even before that. I will be speaking now about the damages. I'll be speaking about what can be done. But first of all, let me say about very recent developments, since they are not on the slides. So as I mentioned 2 days ago, we had a technical blackout. I know there's been a lot in the media about blackouts, but we need to differentiate outages, electricity outages, when electricity is shut down, controlled, planned, or even in an emergency mode, but still planned. And also blackouts. Blackouts is something of the technical nature that occurs when electricity equipment installed either on the generation sides or on the power transmission sides actually orders the shutdown. And that is something you not control. That is something, say, in electricity sector specifically, that is trying to find the balance between generation and consumption, and it can take as long as full destruction and dissolvement of the electricity system. Thank God this did not happen 2 days ago, but it was the most severe attack ever since February 24th. And the good sign that we've seen these days is that Ukraine was indeed able to quickly recover. And we are talking now about restarting 3 nuclear power plants, which is tremendously big. We're talking about restarting coal-fired thermal power plants, and we are talking about restarting hydro generation as well. So this has been quite massive. We have places, even in Kiev, that hasn't seen electricity supplied in 30 to 40 hours straight. But we are recovering, and as the nuclear sites start to produce electricity, and it takes an average of 3 days for a nuclear site to go from full stop or from the cold regime to the program regime or to the full operational regime. So we expect that over the weekend we'll be operating at the full capacity. So on the very first day of the full-scale invasion on February 24th, it actually started very early in the morning when Ukraine was doing the test regime in the electricity sector with so-called NSOE connection, and that stands for Connecting to Europe stream. So Ukraine has long been trying to reconnect to Europe instead of being connected to Russia and Belarus. Together with Moldova, Ukraine has gone for the process that lasted, I think, over 12 years And the final stage was doing the test mode. And then, based on the test results, NSOE, the special continental European organization, taken their decision about whether Ukraine is allowed to join. So Ukraine has gone the tests. It was disconnected from the electricity systems of Russia and Belarus. And about in an hour after it has completed the very first tests and remained disconnected, Russia attacked, so approximately 4:30 in the morning. In 7 hours, Russia was able to capture Kakhovska hydropower plant, which is big. You can tell by the map. It's one of the biggest hydropower plants in Europe overall. We saw the first fuel deficit on the stations in approximately 8 hours. And there was a limit set up for the sale of fuel. And in about 11 hours, we heard the news about first gas pipelines being shelled in Mariupol. Just an update from the future. So from these days, there are actually no gas pipelines whatsoever remaining in Donetsk and Luhansk region, in the meaning that they are very severely damaged and non-operational by the most of their lengths. In 12.5 hours, the Chernobyl power plant was captured. Or, pardon, that happened, it was attacked in 12 hours, but in 14.5 hours it was captured, which is quite swiftly. And we also saw fake social media postings and all kinds of cyber attacks during the day, and we will also talk about this a little bit later. So on the days 2 and 3, the fake news continued, massive DDoS and phishing attacks. Electricity supply was also partially cut. Substations, in the meaning of electricity substations, destroyed in Donetsk regions. Buildings in the west, in the east, sorry, in Kharkiv and in Donetsk, lost heating, gas supply, and in the end of the day 3, Ukraine actually denied reconnection to Russia. There were a lot of rumors that Russia would not allow Ukraine to reconnect, but judging from what was happening, Ukraine actually refused in the first place to be reconnected and asked to be connected to NSOE immediately. So instead of going for the 3-day test, Ukraine ended up being disconnected from any partner for 3 straight weeks, which is probably bad, but at the same time, it was telling about how resilient the electricity system was. And it was, I'd say, better than any other test, showing that Ukraine's electricity system was ready to be connected to NSOE and would not cause any trouble. So if we focus on the nuclear sector just for a moment, we had 2 nuclear power plants fully captured. Chernobyl was freed, and the biggest European power plant in Zaporizhia, actually in close to Energodar, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant remains unfortunately captured at this time. We saw a lot of threats to physically attack nuclear power plant, especially in Zaporizhia, so Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. We saw the missiles over the sites. We saw shelling of the nuclear power plant facilities. We saw Rosatom, the main operating company in Russia for the nuclear sector, playing an actual terrorist role since their staff is on the occupied power plant. They have what they think legalized this capture through their internal documentation, still fake, but they pretend it's not. We saw a clear drop in nuclear generation. For you just to have a very clear picture of Ukraine's electricity sector, Coming from the old days and before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine was capable of generating around 50, actually a little bit more than 50 gigawatts of electricity. So we had capacity, we had equipment in place that was able to generate over 50 gigawatts, while Ukraine needed in the coldest days of winter just about 20 gigawatts. So as you can tell, Ukraine has a bit over than twice the capacity, the generation capacity it's needed. So I'm telling this because the primary focus when Russia shifted from mild energy sector attacks to actually hitting the sites and hitting the equipment, it focused not merely on generation, but on distribution. And this is key to understand the situation on the ground right now, since even in the attack 2 days ago, they didn't really damage the nuclear generation facilities, but they damaged the equipment that facilitated transportation of electricity from generation sites all the way to consumption, effectively cutting the consumers from receiving electricity. And that actually made the generation facilities to go into overproduction, and then the automatic systems ordered to stop. So as to data before October, we saw the consumption drop of around 30%. That was mirrored in coal production, that was mirrored in thermal power plant production. The renewable generation was severely damaged if we talk about wind and solar. We had the numbers circulating that 90% of wind installations and over 40% at least of solar installations were either damaged or destroyed, since they all are, or the majority of them, are located in the south of the country, where the front lines used to be. We also have information that almost all generation units were at least once damaged. That concerns thermal generation, that concerns hydro generation, that concerns key nodes and substations located in Ukraine. Also, utility payments dropped both from households and businesses, which only illustrates additionally the situation Ilona was talking about. And we desperately need actually a lot of equipment these days to be able to recover quickly. And those include transformers, transmission lines, equipment for substations, and in particular, the high voltage equipment. So talking about the cyber attacks, they are massive. Ukraine is pretty good at being able to defend itself from the cyber attacks. In the years before the full-scale invasion, we had some projects building up the technical capacity, but also understanding in the key operation units of electricity and gas sectors about how to defend ourselves. Ukraine also has quite a history of being attacked in the cyberspace. But since February 24th, we've seen over 1,020,000 attacks by now, compared to 900,000 for the whole year of 2021. So this is quite illustrative, I think. In gas sector, we also have, of course, the share of effect. So the consumption also dropped 30%. Production dropped at first a lot, but with recapturing of Kharkiv region, now Kherson region, we also see a lot of rebuilding. So the numbers of production drop may not be up to date anymore, but that's the recent what we have. We saw attacks at the underground gas storages, as well as production sites. And yeah, Укргазвидобування used to close part of the facilities, but that was again in Kharkiv region. Hopefully this is back into operation at the moment. We saw a physical cut of one of the streams for Russian gas transit to Europe, as Russia captured the compressor stations. So the interconnection point in the town of Sakharanivka was suspended. Basically, Russia started stealing gas, but Ukraine effectively stopped this Russian effort. As I've mentioned, the gas pipelines are badly damaged in some regions. They, I would say, to the state that they were close to being not existing anymore, but they can be recovered again. And I would here also echo the comment about heroic recovery teams of Ukrainian energy personnel that even under shelling come to the sites and repair gas and electricity system. And this is basically a key for very fast recovery and bringing lights back on. Oil products is very important because Ukraine back in 90s used to even produce some oil products, whereas now the consumption dropped, the oil depots are fully destroyed, the refineries are fully stopped, although out of 3, only 1 was operational. But being a sad story, it is at the same time a good story and a very successful case about Ukraine and partners being able to recover in about 2 months. We succeeded to fix and to set up the import routes, which was very uneasy, but Ukraine is now doing quite well, I would say, on the oil products, both gasoline and diesel. And even a recent attack 2 days ago actually caused some queues on the gas stations, but as of today, they are probably not that big anymore, so you can freely have access and tank. And this is due to very good cooperation, and I think not only help and charity, but also a business case for the Western companies risking, but also having their portion of the business here. Yeah, this is a quick slide. What was caused by the attack on oil products? You can see all these sectors being attacked at the same time, as well as situation being effectively solved in them. Environment, a very constrained situation there, as Ukraine accounted Russia for over 2,200 crimes against the environment on Ukraine's territory. That would include all kinds of pollutions, leaks, restricting access to drinking water, doing a lot of danger to wildlife, and also causing massive forest fires, as you can tell. But how do we see this as a good story as well? Remembering about Raphael's desire to look at the bright side of the war, if there is one. So Ukraine, even before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine committed to implementing the Green Deal initiative that started in the EU. And as we see now, unlike the forecasts that EU would probably resist to the non-carbon future, we see a lot of investments still going to non-carbon technology. And we think this is very important as we look at the lessons learned from the war. So when Ukraine talks about rebuilding, or we'd rather talk about build back better, and this stands for equivalent of modernize, we see the need of implementation the Green Deal. That includes efficiency, and that also includes technology. Ukraine has been very successful on the battlefield, integrating the most modern technology into operation. And from what we've heard, this accounts for a big part of success of Ukrainian military people on the battlefield. This can, should, and needs to be done in the energy sector as well. So there's a high chance of not only rebuilding Ukraine's assets, which are indeed the old Soviet build or Soviet-fashioned assets, but rethinking the whole design, rethinking the whole logic and need, and then knowing better how, where, and how most effectively to implement the modern available technology. So how this unlocks the energy digitalization potential? As you probably know, digitalization is a big portion of the Green Deal package. As we see now, digitalization and technology contributes a lot to efficiency. It enables operation of big portions of information where conclusions can be and decisions can be made. So from the just a quick glance on what can be done, we see actually potential for more aggregators. And we in Ukraine even started having very simple, but still automated decisions or solutions for example, tracking electricity outages in different parts of the cities or in different parts of Ukraine as well, when they are announced, when they are planned. Price comparison tools. Price comparison tools are actually part of the European regulation that is compulsory for Ukraine as well. So we in the think tank I work for, it's called Dixi Group, and it's been in operation ever since 2008, and we're focusing on the electricity, on the energy sector, and on the energy information security, European integration, and things like that. So we developed our own tool. It's called Kasoteka. It was designed to compare the gas prices on the gas market in Ukraine that was opening for competition. So things like that would be also needed once the war is over and the markets develop further. The personal assistant type of solutions facilitating payments, but also checking out prices, managing complaints, and we've built one of those. We have built the application. It's called Energy Online, so it facilitates your complaint all the way to the gas or electricity supplier, and when this is not answered, it can facilitate it even further to the regulation authority. So things like that can be done. Also, the personal use systems, combining the, for example, batteries, electric vehicles, and other applications and technical parts would be probably part of our future and part of the benefits that the Green Deal would bring. So I'll probably stop here and look for your questions, because the topic is really huge, but I hope I was able to unite some dots and bring some thoughts to you.
I have one, Anton. So you said that maybe you can elaborate this. Uh, so it is 4.6 million people do not have access to clean water, to drinkable water.
Yeah, this is the information as of, if I remember correctly, either end of summer or early September. I'm not the clear environmental specialist, but I would pursue that a large part of this is caused by the reason that the Donetsk and Luhansk regions are or have been used for extraction. Of course, coal extraction in the first place, but also a lot of industry sites that firstly were very pollutive in the first place, but also demanded control and management in the second place. And if we're speaking precisely about coal mines, they need certain schemes of electricity supply for the pumps to be running, and for the underground water being pumped out. That didn't happen for a number of years before the full-scale invasion. I would imagine it became really worse than even that after the full-scale invasion. Also, a lot of industry leftovers, I would imagine, ended up in rivers and all kinds of water sources that has been supplying cities and towns, as well as shelling the electricity supply lines would effectively cut water treatment facilities. So that would also elaborate on the effect.
Okay, and maybe a second question. What is it that at least the government tells, or even think tanks, as you tell the people that they can do about it to heat their homes? I mean, what alternatives are suggested?
Well, to address this question fully, I must start with saying that the best way to secure, the future when there is heat, electricity, and the gas supply, we need first and foremost anti-missile systems, right? So military equipment capable of securing or clearing out the skies and stopping Russia as a clear terrorist state, as we all see these days, is an absolute must. But coming down to more practical things, we've been talking to a lot of city mayors and local communities leaders, also in the settlements on the front lines, and we saw a lot of them thinking about two things: one being diversification, and the other one being probably decentralization, and having a good renewable option. I must say I would be quite cautious about going full-scale renewable because, as I mentioned, renewables were pretty damaged, and they are, of course, much easier to install than, say, a nuclear power plant, but also they are quite easy to damage, as you would imagine. But sometimes they make a lot of sense, like in the case of using them for powering up water treatment facilities somewhere, say, in the south of the country or close to the south of the country. Although we also have discussions with mayors in the north of the country and in the center of the country that were considering, for example, photovoltaics, so solar power systems, as part of their backup generation, even to be able to power up mobile phones and other portative devices. A lot of people thinking about diversification in the country, so outside Kyiv, in rural districts, think about hardwood. and systems built on the hardwood, including boiling systems and heating systems. But to be sure to go for this option, one needs to study the situation in the region, whether they have enough hardwood available, whether, for example, they have a source of chopped wood, and so on and so forth. So a lot of local options must be on the radar to really to be considered for this winter also. But we feel like hardwood is part of the solutions, especially in the rural areas, for being autonomous, at least in heating. If we talk about generators, which is now a lot heard, generators is, of course, a good backup or reserve option. And in the facilities like hospitals, like schools, like, let's say, public heating, for example, not public heating units as we regularly use them, but places for instant public heating in case of emergency. They are obviously needed. Various capacities, of course, water running, water systems, water treatment, purification, and so on and so forth. But one needs to also think very complex about them, having not only the generator itself, but having also a fuel source or fuel storage for it, as well as accounting for emissions that could be dangerous. So knowing the rules of generator use is an absolute must. I think generators alongside of batteries of various sizes and capacities are now very widely used. What the government also offers is these heating points, or as they call it, strong points, where one can come and get some heat, power for their portable devices, and also some warm food, I imagine, are part of the solution. But you also need to understand that there is no effective solution when it is about a clear and on the purpose destruction. Because having a missile attack, it would take you, what, an hour, well, some hours, right, to destroy a big portion of the system, be it electricity system, gas system, or oil product system. And it is about days, if not weeks, that would take you, even having equipment, even having spare parts, to rebuild. So the speed of destruction and the speed of rebuilding are very different. And I'm afraid for some things, like, for example, electricity substation, you have to have overhead lines. It is unlike, for example, gas system, where you have the underground gas pipelines, and they are okay even in case of heavy shelling. But having overhead power lines, it's just impossible to cover them with concrete or stone or anything else to effectively reserve them for being destructed.